Hola, amigos. How are you? My second video of the day. After talking about all the overrated albums that I did today, I want to talk about music that I'm actually passionate about, and records that I love, and music that I love, and focus on remixes. I've been wanting to do this remix series for a long time, and I'm going to start. I'm going to start doing it right now. I love remixes. I always have, and I think the art of the remix was never better than in the decade of the 90s. And the Orb, I think, with the exception of a few others, are the greatest remixers of other people's material that has ever existed on this earth. I can't think of maybe Andy Weatherall, maybe Jack Dangers, maybe Carl Craig. There are a few others that I would throw in here, and I'm going to do videos on those bands as well. And I've already done a Weatherall video, but I'm going to do another Weatherall video. I'm going to do a remix series. I love remixes. I think that there are a handful of artists that are able to take the art of the remix and turn it into something entirely new and exciting and different and forward thinking and original and all the things that I think are important when you're doing a remix. There are people that just take a track and they extend it a couple minutes or they just do something very minor. And then there are the groups that are the heavyweights. There are the groups that turned the art of remixing into what it is today. And of course, this is all just my opinion, but I also think I'm right. I've been listening to remixes for a long time, and there are a number of bands and groups and artists and people that I think do exactly the right thing with their remixes. And these bands also happen to be some of my favorite groups and artists. So I'm going to talk about them. I can't think of a better artist to start with than the Orb. Honestly, the Orb are one of the greats when it comes to remixing groups. They don't do it much anymore. I mean, they do here and there, but not much. You don't see it as much as they used to, at least. Back in the 90s, there hardly was a month that went by that you couldn't see the Orb's name on another person's record. They were doing so much remixing. It was just I mean, you guys who were alive during the 90s who were buying these records and listening to this type of music, you know what I'm talking about. It was a very exciting time for music. There was so much good shit coming out on a weekly basis. You couldn't keep up with it. I remember at the time I thought I had my thumb on the pulse of this whole scene and I would rapidly pick up everything I could. And then 4 or 5 years later, I discover something else. I'd be like, how did I miss this? I thought I had my thumb on the pulse of this. Just so much good shit came out. So I'm going to get right to it. This is going to be an ongoing series. And this is part one of my remix series, The Orb, Dr. Alex Patterson, and all of the people that he has brought on board to record with him. I've talked about The Orb before, and I'm going to mention this again. I think it's worth saying that Alex Patterson is only as good as the sum of his parts, and I mean the people he surrounds himself with. My favorite era of the Orb was the original era. Maybe not the original. I guess that was he and Jimmy Cauty of the KLF, but I'm talking particularly about the thrash era. Chris Weston. What Chris Weston did. I'm such a fan of this guy's music. I'm not such a fan of him as a person. I actually had a couple of personal encounters with him right here on this channel. I'm sure he's a nice guy, and I've read some things about how he's a difficult person and he's hard to deal with, and he can be pretty brutal and he can be pretty mean. And I didn't know what those people were talking about. I was I took it all with a grain of salt. I was like, huh, well, that's not very fair to say about him, and that's kind of mean. Like people in the Orb, like what I'm trying to say is people in the Orb, Alex Patterson, and namely Thomas Fellman. I interviewed Thomas Fellman, who was an on again, off again member of the Orb. I interviewed him for Discogs, and we had a short discussion about Chris Weston during that interview. And I asked Fellman about him, and Fellman, he was very talkative during the whole interview, but when I brought up Weston, he kind of fell silent. He went very quiet. And he said, you know, Chris just doesn't have a very healthy soul. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, wow, it was a very dour, somber mood when I brought his name up. And then fast forward 6 or 7 years to last summer when I did a video about Primal Scream. Maybe it's been a couple years, but I did a video on Screamadelica. Thrash himself, Chris Weston, reached out. He made a comment, a couple of comments on that video, and I have to say he was a dick. He was a total prick. In fact, I took one of his comments off because, yeah, he said something just completely out of bounds and rude and obnoxious, and it was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess this is what they were talking about. I didn't want to believe it. And maybe he'll watch this video. I don't know. Chris, buddy, if you're watching this, give me a break. I love you. I love your music, but take it down a notch, dude. I know you have reason to be angry. I have no doubt in my mind you have reason to be pissed off. Don't take it out on me. I'm a fan. So, anyway, yeah, he was just there's no other word for it. He was a prick, and he's got every right to be a prick. But that doesn't take away my love of Chris Weston's music. The Orb era with him in it produced some of the most fantastic, amazing, brilliant music I've ever heard in my life. And a lot of it is down to Chris Weston. I don't think the Orb is the Orb without all of these other people that Patterson surrounds himself with. Listen to all of the Orb records. They all sound very different. I don't think that's so much a product of Patterson always changing his sound. That's a product of who he brings in with him. My personal favorite Orb album is UF Orb. And that's an album he did with Chris Weston. He also brought in some other members, but it was mainly Chris Weston. My other favorite Orb album is Moon Building. That's the record he did 7 or 8 years ago with Thomas Fellman. That's the time that was the era that I interviewed Fellman. And I love Thomas Fellman. So, and Moon Building sounds like Thomas Fellman. It sounds more like Fellman than it sounds like the Orb. So I don't know that Patterson would deny any of this. But it is what it is. So that era of the Orb is my all-time favorite, that early mid-90s sound when Thrash was on board. Thrash is just an unbelievably talented producer, and I'm honestly sad that he can't make music. He's clearly supremely talented. Yeah, he's an asshole, but so what? A lot of the most brilliant artists are. They're total pricks. But this is the era that I want to, most of these remixes I'm going to bring up surround the early mid 90s. The first remix I want to talk about, and by the way, before I get into it, I'm going to do a little mix on, not a mix, it's a track list basically. On YouTube, you can arrange tracks in order. You don't actually mix them, you just kind of put songs in an order and let people play it. So I'm going to do that. So please check out my Orb playlist, my Orb remix playlist that I will put out there on this video. And I'll try to arrange it in an order that sounds like it flows, you know. I am a DJ and I like songs to mix together. I can't actually mix the videos, but I'll put them in order so you can enjoy it, hopefully. And the vast majority of these mixes I'm going to put on there are from the Thrash era. So Thrash, thank you for giving me all of your brilliant music. Just stop being so mean. People want to like you, dude. All right. So my number, these aren't in any order, by the way. This is just a short list of my favorite remixes. The first one I want to talk about is Mike Oldfield, the remixes that the Orb did for Mike Oldfield called, was it Sentinel? I had to think of it. I don't have the records in front of me, but I will post an image right here. You should see the image right here somewhere. Sentinel. Brilliant. Some of the greatest remixes I've ever heard. In fact, the Orb do two mixes. They do one techno mix and they do one ambient mix. And the longer of the two, actually, like it's a 14.5 minute jam, is the techno mix. This is one of my favorite techno tracks of all time. And this is what I love about the Orb. When they did their remixes, they did the mix, but it was also almost an entirely original track. So when I think of their remixes of Sentinel by Mike Oldfield, I almost think that it's just their own song. I think of it as an Orb track. If you hear the original Mike Oldfield track, you realize that their mix sounds nothing like it. It's got a couple of elements, but they take a 3 or 4 minute song and they turn it into this 14.5 minute intense, really menacing techno juggernaut. It's so fucking good, man. It's so good. Um, I really wish they had made more music like that. If there was one other Orb track I would compare it to, maybe it would be Assassin. But the Oldfield remix is better, I think. And then there's another 12.5 minute remix they did, which is the ambient mix. So you get almost a full half an hour of Orb remixes. So I'll put this out. All of these I'm talking about will go on the playlist. I'm not going to mention every Orb remix, by the way, because I'd be sitting here for hours. But that would be the first one I would mention, is the Mike Oldfield remix. It is so fantastic. Every time I think of the Orb remixing others, that's usually the first mix my mind goes to, is the Mike Oldfield remixes. Fantastic. Brilliant remixes. Those of you who enjoy remixes and you never heard this, or these both of the Oldfield remixes, I hope you check out my playlist because I'm going to put it on there. Brilliant stuff. So good. The second one I want to talk about is remixes they did for Blue Pearl, Mother Dawn, the Mother Dawn remixes. They did 3 remixes called the Bucketeer remixes. 2 of the mixes sound similar. They're slightly different, but they're both like 12, 13-minute long extended psychedelic dub tracks. So good, man. That one came out in 1992. Pretty sure the Oldfield remix came out in 1992 as well. Again, the thrash years. Phenomenal. Blue Pearl, Mother Dawn. Check this out. And it has a third remix, which is a shorter mix and it's more ambient, but it's very spooky, very moody. Excellent. So good. Again, almost another full half hour of remixes. In fact, those 3 probably amount to 30 minutes of music. So the Orb give you a lot of music to sink your teeth into. Blue Pearl, Mother Dawn remix is some of my favorite stuff. Of course, this is the obvious one, Primal Scream, Higher Than the Sun. The version on the album of Screamadelica is the version that the Orb did. That is an edited, truncated version. I talked about this at length during the Primal Scream video I did for Screamadelica, but I highly, highly, highly recommend you pick up the 12-inch of Higher Than the Sun because it has the full 7-minute version. The Orb were just on top of their game here. This is actually when Thrash reached out to me. He had some shit to say about their mix of Higher Than the Sun. He said he didn't like it. He said, I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said he didn't like it. He said it was a record company thing. They just called him up and they had a couple of days to do it and they just shat it out on cue. Well, if that's true, it doesn't matter. The brilliance didn't get squeezed out of it. That's one of the best things I've ever done. Sometimes you just work better under pressure. And maybe they weren't under any pressure. I don't know. But what Thrash said, he made it sound like it was just a throwaway track. Well, if that's a throwaway track for the Orb, then that just proves my point about how brilliant they were during this period. Higher Than the Sun, Primal Scream was one of my all-time favorite singles. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And if you ever listen to the original Primal Scream demo version, you'll hear the vast differences that come with the Orb remixes. I like doing that too when I listen to remixes. I like a lot of these reissues that come out these days and these box sets. They'll give you the original demo version from the band, and I love that. I really enjoy listening to the original version and then comparing it to the remix. You can really hear what these guys are doing. when you just hear a remix, you don't necessarily know all the things that they're adding and taking away and mixing and engineering. You don't really get it because you don't hear the original. But when you hear the original of Higher Than the Sun, you're like, Jesus Christ. I mean, the Orb completely took this track and sent it into the stratosphere, totally revamped it, destroyed the track in the most brilliant of ways. So Thrash can dislike it all he wants, but I think it's one of the greatest songs that has ever been created. I love it. Another one of my favorite remixes from the Orb is the KLF 3 a.m. Eternal. They remixed this track. I want to say that came out in 1989, like late 80s, one of their very first remixes. By the way, you can buy a lot of these remixes on these compilations they put out called Anti Aubrey's. What's it called? Anti Aubrey Excursions or something like Beyond the Call of Duty. Anti Aubrey's Excursions Beyond the Call of Duty, something like that. There's a couple of these comps out there, and it compiles a bunch of Orb remixes. They're kind of mixed together. So if you want the full versions, unedited versions, you're better to go out and find the original 12-inch because it has the full unedited versions that are not mixed. But I still recommend you track those down. They're pretty easy to find, and it has a lot of their hard to find remixes. So I have all of these records, so I was able to record these and have them in my archives unedited. But you should definitely check out these Anti-Aubrey compilations. They're pretty good. But the version they did for 3 a.m. Eternal is fantastic. I love it. Early Orb stuff. They use this really cool sample of Blue Danube, Strauss. They put that in the middle of the track. It was just ambient music, that early ambient house sound, the KLF kind, the Orb kind, where they would take these odd, in this case, classical tracks and just put it in the middle of the song. It just you feel like you're in a different world, And they use a really standard, obvious track like Blue Danube, but it still sounds beautiful. Like the song is going and it's this weird ambient version, and then all of a sudden Blue Danube comes in and it sticks around for about a minute and then it fades away and it goes back to 3 a.m. Eternal. Just really cool. Love that early ambient house sound. I just love it. That's when I grew up. That's my jam, I love that shit. And it's the KLF. How do you not love that? And I always thought it was Orbital too. The name of the remix is like Blue Danube Orbital or something. So I always assumed it was Orbital that did that mix, but it's actually the Orb. So if you ever see that record and you see Orbital on there, it's not Orbital. It's not the Hartnell brothers. It's the Orb. So there's that. Following up with that, I would put one of my favorite remixes from the Orb. I'd probably follow that up with Erasure. They did a remix of Ship of Fools, and that came out in 91, 92. I've talked about that record in my Erasure video. I did an Erasure video last year or 2 years ago, some point in the last 2 years. I did show that record, so if you actually want to see the record, go watch my Erasure video. I talked about all of those remix promos they put out in the early 90s. They were called Club. It was like Club 1, Club 2, and Club 3. And there was like a Fortran 5 remix on one side, which Thrash was also a part of. I don't think he was never actually in the band, but he recorded with them. And then you flipped it over and there was an Orb remix of Who Needs Love Like That? Or no, Ship of Fools, sorry. Ship of Fools. I think it was called Orbital South Sea Isles remix or something. 10-minute ambient dub jam. Oh my God, it's so good. One of my favorites. Erasure, Ship of Fools. They also remixed Depeche Mode. They did a remix of Happiest Girl. That's not my favorite remix, actually. It's good. I always thought it was kind of one note, a little bit, maybe. I don't dislike it. Not one of my favorite Orb tracks. I don't know. When I talk about Erasure, I guess I kind of think of Depeche Mode too. They're both on Mute, both 80s, 90s pop bands. Both had a lot of really good remixes. But yeah, they remixed Depeche Mode as well. Happiest Girl. I don't know that I put that on my all-time greats list, but it's there. They remixed Big Audio Dynamite 2 as well. When that came out in 1991, I want to say, they remixed The Globe, one of the most annoying tracks of all time. I love Big Audio Dynamite too, and I did hour-long Big Audio Dynamite video 3 or 4 years ago. One of the first videos I have ever done for this channel. If you're interested in Big Audio Dynamite, go back to my earliest videos. You'll see one. It might have been my second video. I did Weatherall, and then I did Big Audio Dynamite right after that. And the Orb came in, and they literally removed every annoying aspect of that song. I loved it. They went in there and they were like, this part sucks, this part sucks, but that part's kind of cool. Let's just keep that part and then do our own thing for 9.5 minutes. And that's what they did. They took a shit song and they turned it into something that was vastly better. That is the quintessential reason of doing a remix, I think. You take a song, you might not even like it, and you make it good. You turn it into something that you could actually listen to. It's exactly what the Orb did with the Globe, Big Audio Dynamite. It is a great remix. One of my favorite remixes, Big Audio Dynamite, the Globe. They also, another mix that I was surprised I liked so much, they did a remix for Lisa Stansfield. Those of you who remember Lisa Stansfield, Time to Make You Mine. They did a remix for Time to Make You Mine. And I think Youth was in on that one too. Really, really cool remix. It's like a 9 minute, just like a down tempo jam, but it's very club oriented. The beats are really fat and thick, really cool vocals. Not really an ambient song. It's just a down tempo groover. I think that came out in 1990. That was one of their earlier remixes. Time to Make You Mine, Lisa Stansfield. So good. Again, I'll put it in the playlist. You guys can check it out. One of my favorites from the Orb. Also, something that they did, I'm trying to think, was this in the mid 90s? No, maybe early 90s. I don't know if this was the thrash era. They did a remix from Keiichi Suzuki. I want to say it's Keiichi Suzuki? What was that? Anyway, the name of the song was Satellite Serenade. And this is a great remix. One of my, probably, if I had to make a top 5 Orb remix list, this would be on there. Keiichi Suzuki, Satellite Serenade. And I'm doubting myself on the name of that. Hang on a minute. I'm going to look that one up. I could swear that one was called Satellite Serenade, but let me check. Yes, Trans-Asian Express. That's the name of the remix. I was going to say that's the name of the song, but it's Trans-Asian Express. I have it sitting right here in front of me. Yeah, Satellite Serenade. Beautiful remix. One of the best things they ever did. It is just fantastic. Check that out. It starts off with kind of the goofy vocal samples from some TV show or some movie somewhere. Has a nice, long, quiet, ambient intro. Then it just starts grooving. Brings in this techno beat, almost kind of tribal, but still slightly down tempo, probably like a 120 BPM, like a nice house groove. And then it kind of drifts away into ambience again. It's a beautiful remix. One of the best Orb tracks. People, if you think you've heard all the Orb tracks and you've never heard their remixes, you are missing out. You've got to hear their remixes. Their best tracks are not on their albums. They're on their singles and their 12 inches and their remixes, man. You've like Blue Room. You've never heard Blue Room if you haven't heard the 12-inch version. If you've only heard the album version, you've not heard the song. Go get the single Blue Room immediately. The 40-minute version. You think the album version on UF Orb is long, at 17 minutes. Go get the 12-inch. It's a 40-minute version, and it's brilliant. Arguably the best thing the Orb ever did. And on top of that, they went on top of the pops and sat there and played chess while the song in the background played. That was their performance. They just played chess. One of the greatest performances ever. They literally were like saying, fuck your stupid show. We're going to sit here and pick our nose and play chess while our song plays in the background. Brilliant. Go get the Blue Room if you've never heard the 40-minute version. It's absolutely brilliant. Next up, I would put Mystic Knights, Raganam Poiser. Raganam Poiser. The beginning of the song has this great sample where you hear this DJ saying, he goes, Saturday night, no. Sunday, no. Monday, Tuesday, I don't think so. Wednesday, nah. Thursday, no. Friday, yes. I used to play that. I used to DJ at a club every Friday night, and I would start off almost every set with that. It was perfect. And this is one of their more techno remixes. It's a pretty long mix. It's like 10, 11 minutes long. They do a couple of remixes, but this is one of their harder techno tracks. God, it's so good. I want to say it came out in 91, 92, early 90s. Raganam Poiser, Mystic Nights. I'll put it on the playlist. You need to hear this if you've never heard it. In that vein, too, they did a remix for Maurizio. I think the song was called Ploy. Let me look this up. I don't remember the names of the songs, y'all. I don't always remember this kind of shit. But let's see. I'm pretty sure it's called Ploy. Yeah, Ploy. Battersea was an island of mud mix. One of their more straight up techno tracks again. Nice long 11, 12-minute Detroit techno style ambient techno. Early 90s Orb. God, it was so good. Speaking of early 90s Orb too, I just thought they did a remix of Wire as well. They remixed So and Slow It Grows from the First Letter album. So that came out, I don't know, what, 91, right? I did a video on that too, The Wire, First Letter. Go check that out. I talked about the Orb in that video. Watch it. Slow and Slow It Grows, another great, awesome Orb remix. And it also has LFO, an LFO remix. Another classic fucking 90s electronic group, one of the greatest ever. LFO, man. Another one of my faves from the Orb remix wise is Material, Bill Laswell's project. Praying Mantra, I believe the song was called. They do like a 17, 18-minute psychedelic, tambla-laden, Eastern ambient groove. It's so good, man. Not that's that kind of music isn't normally what I absolutely love, but the Orb step in and just turn it on its head, turn it into this really long, extended, awesome track. It's so good. Another favorite remix of the Orbs I just absolutely love is Yello. They did a remix for You Gotta Say Yes to Another Excess. One of my favorite Yello tracks. I talked about this too. Go look up my Yello Pocket Universe video. The full 12-minute version of that Orb remix is on the box set. They released that. It's called Hands on Yello. It's a compilation. It got released on 6 LPs or 6 12 inches, Lots of music, and there's a 12-minute Orb remix. That was later. I think that was 96, 95, 96. I think Thrash had left. Maybe Thrash was still there. I don't know. I don't know the chronology there, but great remix. Just kind of another harder techno version, but lots of ambient flourishes in there as well. And it's Yello. It's hard to fuck up Yello, okay? And speaking of Yello, I would also put Yello Magic Orchestra in there. They remixed YMO a couple of times. They did Tong Poo, which those mixes are pretty good, and then they did Techno Done. Now, those remixes, to my knowledge, are only available on CD, which is a bummer. I would like to have those on wax. I guess it doesn't matter, but... Well, no, it does matter. I'd like to have those on vinyl, just so I could rip them into my archives. But until then, I have a low-res version of the CD. And it's like a full album's worth of remixes. And that was early 90s. 93, I want to say, 94. Some really long, extended, amazing, psychedelic, out there Orb remixes. So good, man. Just kick ass, taking names, all kinds of influence types of remixes they do for YMO, Yello Magic Orchestra. I hope you've heard of YMO, by the way. If you've never heard Yello Magic Orchestra, they're one of the most influential, electronic groups that have ever existed. You think of the top 5, you put Kraftwerk in there, and you put Brian Eno in there, and YMO would probably need to be in there too. If you don't know Yello Magic Orchestra, oh my God, go do yourself a favor and check them out. Japanese group. I think are they still alive, all 3 of them? I think they are. Ryuichi Sakamoto. You must know him. He's been doing film scores for 40 years now. He's in YMO. Check them out. You definitely will not regret that decision. Another one of my favorite Orb remixes, and I'm at a half an hour now. I really wanted to keep this video under half an hour. I've already failed. I'm going to mention a few more, and then I'm going to get the fuck out of here. They did a remix of Front 242. They remixed Rhythm of Time. I've also already talked about this in my Front 242 video when I did the Tyranny for You video. Go check that out. But they did a couple of remixes for Rhythm of Time. They did a Victor the Cleaner remix, and then they did a remix called Messengers from Neptune. I think that was the name of it. It was on the 7-inch only. A 7-inch only remix, which was kind of a bummer. It was a very cool mix. This is a straight up kind of ambient mix, just kind of a little quiet, noisy blip of a track. And when I say blip, I just mean sonically. The track itself is like 8.5 minutes. It's a lengthy song. The better of the two is Victor the Cleaner, the one you get on the 12-inch. Fantastic remixes. That came out in 1991, I think, during their prime, man. Early 90s, that's what it is. Speaking of early 90s, another one of my favorite remixes from the Orb is The Grid, Crystal Clear. And I want to say their remixes were called, one of them was called Crystal Clear Water Revival Remix, and Clear as an Unmuddied Lake remix. So you get a CCR remix reference, and you get a Clockwork Orange reference. Gotta love that. God, I'm trying to think. I want to wrap this up. Oh, Prong. They do an excellent remix of Prong. The track is called Rude Awakening. It's Prong's like a metal band, and they step in. They do kind of a metal remix. It's a shorter remix for them. This came out in the late 90s, but Prong, Rude Awakening. I was surprised how much I like this remix. Check that out. And if you like stuff that's just kind of off center for the Orb, which is mostly what they did anyway. But that remix it kind of stands on its own island. It's just a different sound for the Orb. They went outside their comfort zone and they succeeded. They remixed a band that you wouldn't necessarily think of getting remixed, Prong. All right, I'm just gonna do a couple of more and I'm gonna wrap it up. They did Tangerine Dream. That's another great remix. I want to say Towards the Evening Star, right? Let me look up my list here. Towards the Evening Star, Mandarin Cream remix. Yes, Tangerine Dream. Who doesn't like Tangerine Dream, for God's sakes? We all love Tangerine Dream, and they do a fantastic remix of Towards the Evening Star. I remember my record too, my 12-inch of that is like on a green glitter disc. It's pretty to look at. It doesn't sound phenomenal, but it's pretty to look at. I'm going to do one more. I want to think of a later remix. These are all early stuff. Let me think. Oh, I know. Shrubbin'. What was the name of that song? There's a group called Shrubbin'. Terrible name for a band, but the name of it, Echoes. He did this remix with Thomas Fellman. And this came out about a decade or so ago. It sounds like a Thomas Fellman track. I mean, anytime Fellman's with the Orb now, it sounds, the music ends up sounding more like Fellman's music than it does. Well, like I said, Patterson's a product of who he surrounds himself with. So I love Fellman. So those are really the two iterations of the Orb that I love. It's when Thrash is with him and it's when Fellman's with him. That's when I love the Orb. And it sounds like a Fellman song, really. Shrubbin'. Check that one out. Echoes is the name of the song. And then to wrap this up, I'll say Prince Thomas. Prince Thomas. They remixed Prince Thomas about, I want to say, a decade ago, 9 or 10 years ago. Prince Thomas put out a 4-album set. I think it was called Principe de Norte or something. All the tracks were letters, and I don't remember the letter that the Orb remixed. It was M or N or something. But Fellman and Patterson did a remix of Prince Thomas. That is great. It's so good. Again, it sounds like a Thomas Fellman track, which is no bad thing, man. It's a fantastic remix. I'll put that on the playlist for sure. All of these I'm talking about, I'm going to put on a playlist. And these remixes are long too. So by the time I'm done with this mix, you're gonna have like a 2 or 3 hour playlist to listen to. So okay, they've done other remixes. I can't talk about them all, or I will be here all night long. But I wanted to start off my remix series with the Orb. I love the Orb. I don't love all of their iterations. I don't love all of their albums. I don't love all of their remixes. What are your favorites? Please tell me. I would love to know your favorite Orb remixes and your favorite albums from them. My favorite album of the Orb will always be UF Orb. UF Orb. One of my favorite records, just false stop. That's it. UF Orb. Beautiful record. I can't explain how much I love that album, and I'll do a video on that at some point. In fact, maybe I'll do it soon. Just get all my Orb shit out of the way. But that is Remix Series video number 1. I start with the Orb because they are one of the greatest bands ever to do it. In fact, I would posit an argument that the Orb are one of the reasons why remixers have some kind of template to start from. They are one of the groups that set a blueprint for it. In the 80s, remixes were you usually would just send a track to some studio company man or company woman, and they do a remix for you, and they wouldn't really remix it. They just take your track, they throw a couple extra minutes of the same beat on there, loop a vocal over and over, and then there was your remix. That's more of an edit. You're going in there and you're editing things. You're not actually reproducing, remixing, reinventing. And the Orb is absolutely one of the first groups to ever do that. It was a very exciting time, the late 80s, early 90s, where all these groups were starting to remix. You bought the records more for the remixes. At least I did. Like when I saw the Orb's name on a remix, I didn't pay any attention to the artist who was getting remixed. I just saw the Orb. On the cover of the record, you'd see the name of the band. You'd see Lisa Stansfield, Time to Make You Mine, and then you'd flip it over and it was Lisa Stansfield everywhere. And then very tiny print, you'd see in the credits, remixed by the Orb. And it was like, there it is. So Stansfield got all the recognition, she got all the money, she got all the accolades, but the real talent is in those tiny little details, the tiny little print. That's what I spent my time doing back then when I was record shopping. I was looking for credits. Who produced this? Who remixed this? And the Orb is one of the first groups I ever did that with. It was fun. It was a different time. I'm getting a little nostalgic now, of course, but the Orb is one of the greatest remix groups of all time, and I couldn't think of a better group to start the remix series off with. So I hope you enjoyed this, all 38 plus minutes of this. And until next time, if you'd like me to talk about a remixer that you enjoy, let me know. I'll happily do a video about it if I have the knowledge of it. I've spent thousands of hours listening to the Orb over the years, so I can just talk about this stuff off the top of my head. But if you have any requests, let me know. If I have knowledge of it, I will gladly talk about it because yeah, remixing, I love it. I love it. I spend a lot of my time listening to them, and very, very few are better than the Orb when it comes to the art of the remix. So until next time, y'all, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.